Da-da-da. Hey everyone, Matt from Soundrolling.com here with another sound chat session with Michael Wynne. Hey Michael, how's it going?
Hey Matt, how is it? Good to see you.
Yeah, awesome. So we're going to be talking because predominantly you are in the location world, but you also do a bit of post-production as well, which we'll get into. But firstly, what are you working on at the moment?
Well, currently I'm just trying to wrap up the year. I'm not on any shows currently. Most of the production work I've been doing is a combination of second unit stuff. Recently did some day playing second unit on Game of Silence and got to do some second unit work on Finding Carter and a couple other those TV shows, and then also some E&G and corporate stuff, commercials and so forth. And also on the studio side, just, wrapping up projects that are consistent, some post work for some corporate clients that I have, and, with Verizon, and I think that's about it right now for the moment. My weeks typically, they can be suspiciously slow looking on a Sunday evening, and then by the time I get to Friday, it could usually be a lot busier. So that's about what. Yeah.
Yeah, it's that time of the year when everything's it's the ebb and the flow of it all. It all seems to be January is always a bit quieter, but sometimes Christmas can be like full on, and sometimes it's not. I always find August a really strange time as well. I'm always quiet there for some reason. But,
yeah,
I think it's funny just when you get different clients and they're turning over at a different pace. You come to some kind of natural highs and lows, which is cool.
Yes, absolutely.
And so with the post-production stuff that you're doing at the moment, do you have a home studio? Are you working with a group of people? How are you kind of set up for that?
Well, great. I have a company that we call Michael Wynne Productions, and it's commonly known as MWP, Original Sound Production. And I have a commercial recording studio that I lease in an area of Atlanta called Fourth Ward. And it's a multi-level building where we have like some post video production companies on the upper level, and I'm in the lower level. So as far as a team is concerned, I have one full-time guy that's worked with me for about 3 years named Eric Thames, and who does primarily music editing. He also does some sound mixing and production sound mixing and sound design. And we have was an intern, but now a freelance. He's working freelance for us. A guy named Matt Thierry, who is a recent graduate of SCAD, who has been doing some audio post-studio work in combination with also learning production work with the intention of doing more utility work. He's been doing utility work with me on set and so forth.
Fantastic. And you mentioned before about how you were doing some teaching. So is he related to a course that you were teaching at?
No, I had done a run of teaching from 2009 to 11 as a freelance instructor for a company called Atlanta Institute of Music. And I guess it's not a company per se, it would be a school. They are post-secondary education. I believe they're accredited now. When I was working with them at the time, they were more of like a trade school per se. So they had a music program, and then they had, I helped them as in by teaching and writing some classes for their sound program. And it has a name that's not sound program. I can't recall at the moment, but it's like an audio engineering, type program that was like a year long. So with them while I was there, I was, teaching some. I have some background in music production when I first started, and also an audio post-production course was one of my main focuses, and also a production sound course.
Wow, you're the king of sound. Nice.
Well, no, maybe not the king, but definitely wear some hats.
Yeah, well, it's really interesting just being able to again, hopefully with this series, people are not just checking out just their people that are related to their field, but I find more and more that people are kind of multi-skilled in terms of having the kind of whole process in mind. I mean, do you personally find that it's really useful to be able to completely understand the post end and what you can get away with it, so to speak, depending on location, and the location work, so kind of what battles you're fighting day to day?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, I think the first thing to say to that is that having a focus is very important. I think to communicate to anyone who's first starting out or young, and not necessarily trying to take on everything and be everything in your career. The way that my career has unfolded throughout the years was just a natural progression of really the work that I could find at the time. So things kind of it was a matter of survival in a sense. So, when I started working in sound in Atlanta as a professional was around 2004, as in for my living. So the film industry, although it was here in the city, was not what it is today. So the visibility to that and finding my craft and what I liked was just a matter of putting myself out there and trying to align with my passions and see what landed.
And so how did you go from so you have a music background? I'm wondering when your actual point of going kind of full-time professional into how going full-time into professional sound came about.
Yeah, and thanks for asking that question. It's probably better to talk about more of a progression of time period. And I mean, I'd always had an interest in sound as a youngster, and remember very vividly, recording on cassettes and dual cassette decks where you could record on each side with a microphone input on each side, and doing experimental type things, or spending the time looking through Radio Shack ads, or running to the store to look at a speaker. And at that time, I didn't really understand or have the visibility to know that sound, this could be a career or something that you would do. But I definitely had that geekiness in me, and then a love for music as well. And so I started playing guitar and got serious about it in high school. And then the natural evolution of having a band, and then inevitably led me into the process of recording. So I was always the guy in the band who was recording the band, with that same dual cassette deck. Eventually moving to the cassette 4-track recorder. And if you had one of those at the time, and this was in the early 90s, and you could make a whole demo, your EP of your band with that. And around 1999 was the first time I started a home studio and actually bought what I would call my first professional recording system, which was a Tascam D88 combined with a TAC mixer called a TMD 1000, which was an inexpensive $500 mixer that you could get 8 inputs on one side, which would then have to be sent, and it had a digital out to the D88 via a SPDIF connector, and then it would return into the other 8 channels. And I remember it was that system that actually taught me digital workflow and clocking. And I can remember being one time in the studio trying to set it up and having this awful, terrible noise because I had misclocked it, or the awful clicking sounds, and then eventually learned about clock masters and slaves. And in that time, I was absolutely obsessed with learning about sound. The internet was around, obviously, but it was more like AOL chat rooms, and at least how I knew it. So it was going to Borders books and just trying to learn more. Now, just to back up, I studied jazz studies in college for a couple years. So went to University of North Florida. So my education is in music. And I left early out of that because I was going to be a rock star, and that's how I ended up in Atlanta in '95. But to fast forward again, like any 18-year-old kid, right? So moving into 2004, I was able to get my first professional recording studio gig, where I was actually able to work on a large format console and work in a studio environment here in Atlanta called APC Studios, which is no longer around. What's interesting is APC Studios was owned by a sound mixer who works for Tyler Perry named Sal Napo, still a friend of mine today. And he owned this large audio post production facility and gave me keys to the place. And we said, hey, you know, we'll 50-50, you bring in the bands, you record it, and, you know, and I could make money providing I brought in my own business. So you know, that's when my music production career started. And I was really fortunate to have some super solid engineers there. You know, one of them, Scott Patton, who is now the music director and lead guitar player for Sugarland and Christian Bush, and which is kind of music industry stuff. But then another guy named Bruce Bennett, who's also still here in Atlanta, who taught me how to work in a professional environment as far as how to do punch-ins or work. And at that time, I do want to say that we were, you know, I'm very much a digital baby. I mean, even I was right at that transition when I came in to where studios were starting to move to Pro Tools and so forth, away from analog. So I'm not a tape splicer. So, you know, I wish I could say I was, but I'm not. And so moving forward, I did a couple years of that. And then in 2006, oh, actually, no, it was sooner than that. Somewhere around 2005 or 6, I got the offer to work on a short film from a director. And even the owner of APC had asked me, have you ever been interested in maybe doing audio post? And my immediate answer was, no, I'm not. That sounds boring. You know, my thing is music, and that's what I want to do. Somehow I got hooked into one of these doing sound for, and this is when I say sound, post sound for one of these 48-hour film projects, which is I don't know, is that also in the UK as well? Or?
Yeah, big thing over here now. We have 60-hour, there's 100-hour. They've started making.
Oh, you guys get more hours. Okay, so we
no. Well, we have 48, and then some of the competitions are 60. Some of them they're all making their own niche for 1 hour. I mean,
I was somehow tricked into working on one of those films because the person I had met, she said, "Would you be willing to do the sound on our film?" And I didn't even know what that meant at the time. I just knew that I wasn't interested in doing it. But at the time she said, well, you know Pro Tools, right? I said, well, yeah, I know Pro Tools. And she says, well, then you could totally do it. But I think ego then stepped in. I said, you know, and then she was going to let me do the music as well. So I was like, okay, I get to do the music. You know, in the studio, I was recording the music and bands were telling me kind of what to do in a sense. And I thought, well, this is an opportunity I can actually practice my creativity and my audio skills in one set. So that being said, that's how I got involved in working on my first film project. And I remember it was one of those typical don't sleep. I remember I had a little inbox and an old PowerBook G4 or whatever.
Wow.
And I went into this, I don't remember the name of this post-production company, but they did commercials. And we were inside of their space doing this 48-hour film. And I had the greatest time of my life. And at the end of that, I realized at that moment that I had found my passion. And at the time I said, that passion is I'm a composer. And, but what the passion really was for is working with picture and the love of doing that and the emotion of doing that and what that meant and felt for me hit me at a level that I had never experienced working in music. So somehow or another, I got lucky from that. And the post-production company that was there said, we really like your music. Will you do 2 syndicated commercials for us? I said, sure. Now, granted, I didn't know what that was, or did I know what you would even charge for anything like that. So luckily, I knew a composer who actually had experience, and I called and I said, well, what would you charge for 2 commercials? He told me what the amount was, and I was taken back.
Yeah.
You can do what for what? You know? So anyway, so I went there and I did those. And then somehow that turned into my first feature film. Less than a year later, I think it's the first IMDb credit I have, which is I've got 4 little composer credits on there. Sometimes I think it's a curse, but and not a blessing. But anyway, the first one is this film called Sandtown, and it was a feature film, and I did a full score on it. And at that point, it was an incredibly difficult process. It really kicked my butt on all levels, but I was able to get through it, and they loved it, and that's what counted. I know the movie was shot on Super 16. And just working with this picture and seeing this movie and being able to work with the sound was just this incredible experience. And then through that, that film needed to be mixed. At the time, I wouldn't have been qualified to do something like that because I didn't have the experience. So there was a local film mixer in town named Kurt Bush, who has a studio still here called White Dog Studios, who his facility actually earned the business for the film mix. So then at that point, he had brought me in to ask me some of the things that, as the composer that I preferred or if I liked. It was really cool. I got to sit there and watch these guys work with dialogue. He had someone on the dialogue and he had someone on the sound design, and he was doing the mix. And I was watching 3 guys work at the same time on this movie, and I was just blown away. And because I had never been exposed to anything like this at this time. And so at that point, he was expanding into a new facility, and the facility I was at APC had closed their doors. I had moved into a home studio, and he said, "Hey, would you like to come work at our space and be with us here?" As you know, it's this beautiful space in a place called Southern Dairies here in Atlanta. I said, "Absolutely." So I spent the next 3 years in a post studio, and that's where I started to learn the art of post-production. And through that, I started to get, and just to back up a little bit, before I even got into working on that first film, I started to do E&G and corporate sound. I was starting to get some calls for doing these type of things. And at the time, I didn't own any gear. But there was a company called Artisan here in Atlanta that I would actually go to, and they had an FP33 and a couple Electro 185s and a Porta-Brace bag. And I would go rent the equipment from them and then go do the job. And I remember thinking, wow, I'm making a lot of money doing this, and these people are buying me lunch. And I'd never experienced anything like that before. I was like, you get free food. And I'm just going, and the first, and I remember that around the same time, I would be on eBay all day long looking at FP33s because I really wanted to, because I just remember thinking how great it sounded. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Sound Devices designed, built the Shure FP33. I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure they did. So moving back into, so a lot of that diversity was starting to happen, because when I was in White Dog Studios, it was one of those relationships again, which I had to generate my own business. So not only did I have to generate my own work as this in-house composer / sound designer, okay, / music guy. The slashes unfortunately kept continuing. I tried to take them away, but then they would continue. So at that time, having that production sound was just a blessing. And then being able to come back into the studio and do this work over here, I started to slowly build my business where I was making enough to support myself. And when I think about what Atlanta is doing right now, and for someone who may be just starting out in the sound career, it's like, what an amazing blessing it is to have all of these productions, and just, there's so much incredible opportunity. And I'm not saying it wasn't there when I was starting, but it was just, it seemed more difficult. Maybe it wasn't, I don't know. So I'm sure it's still difficult now for some folks. But so fast forwarding into what you were asking, around that same time is when I started also freelance teaching. I got somehow connected. I was working with, when I was transitioning into full-time sound, I was working with a company called the Pro Tools Training Center. I was helping them with enrollment for a while, and then I actually started teaching classes for them and doing some writing for them. And then I got introduced to Atlanta Institute of Music and started working with them and doing freelance teaching for a couple years. So at that point, the White Dog Studios was downsizing and they were moving, and I saw that coming in. I once again went back into a home studio and was able to get a client that was a combination of music editing and production sound mixing. And that's when I started doing my first cart-based work. They were a fitness company here in town. And what we did for them is it was like a O1V rig with a 2 Denon CD player playback systems. And at the time, we were recording to an external Pro Tools rig. And then we were also, so from one cart, we were also feeding 3 cameras, running live sound, stage sound, and playback, and IFB, one person on a set. And I thought that was normal. And so I continued to work with them and do these things. And it was an amazing learning experience of more into going beyond the ENG type stuff and more into more complex signal flows. And speaking of signal flow, just to bring it up, like for those people who are new and learning, that is something that is so crucial and critical, I think, in my career and in any audio person's career. Is, for me, it took many years to really, what I'd say, master signal flow. And what I mean by that is just understanding gain staging, understanding IO, understanding impedances, and all of the technicalities that go into working in any audio workflow. So whether you're working in production, or you're working in post, or you're working in live sound or music playback, ADR, etc., these things are so important. So, you know, and one of the benefits of teaching for a couple years for me is having a music background, and also kind of working my way up through studios, as I really got to solidify during those later years a lot of the technical things I wanted to. So really by teaching, I got to learn incredibly, you know, and really grow as a sound person. And so fast forwarding, around 2000, what is it? Around 2011 or 12, I really noticed what Atlanta was doing. And I noticed that there was these incredible opportunities out there in film and television to work in sound, and really at the time did not know how to approach that. And I did know that I had done some shorts and different things like that throughout the years while doing ENG stuff. I worked on some more of these 48-hour film projects, and anywhere I could do this kind of work to get on set and start learning the gear and doing the stuff. But so around 2011 or 12, you know, I really started investing a lot more into more production sound equipment, you know, 302s, 552s, you know, the 702Ts, the 744, just everywhere where I could start building gear that I could use out on set. And ended up reaching out on JW Sound, found this forum, and I recognized a guy's film credit in a movie I was watching at home with my wife, and it was Whit Norris. And I said, I know that name because I had heard his name through Kurt Busch throughout the years. And you know, there was maybe a few mixers, it seemed like, in Atlanta at the time that you would, him, Aaron Siegel, Shirley Libby, David Terry. There was a very small group of, you know, in my world, I know there was probably more, but these were the names that I heard that we were getting connected with in post. so I ended up reaching out to him through JW Sound, and really he became a mentor for me early on, and helping me learn how to learn the craft of more professional filmmaking from a sound standpoint in the production environment. And so the last 4 years have been a focus in that realm for me. And in the meanwhile, the studio has continued. We opened the studio in 2012 in this space that we were just really fortunate to come across, honestly, and started renting there and building a studio, and started building the post clientele. And that's when I hired Eric and to start handling the day in and day out business. So today I spend most of my time, 89% on set, and the other 10% I spend as a leader for my company and managing my guys and what might happen on the facility. Hopefully that wasn't too long of a.
No. It's
to tell you what happened, and somehow that's, and then we're here today.
Yeah. No, there's so many interesting points. I mean, firstly, I could totally relate with kind of the kind of after learning of learning, as it were, in terms of just those things like gain stages and even these kind of chats, and the kind of blog that I started was like my own way to kind of give myself sorry, the kind of, not necessarily the motivation, but at the start it was sorry, I'm dying here.
It's okay, please take water. Yeah,
unfortunately it's chili water, which is not very helpful.
Oh, that's okay.
And ginger. Oh. Okay.
More like I was thinking more like a brew, it seemed like.
Yeah, sadly not. I'm trying to keep away. The film that I'm working on, everyone is sick at the moment, which is not fun. And I'm the only healthy one. And I just know that as soon as everyone's better, I'm just going to hit the floor and it's going to be terrible. Yeah, so I'm trying to keep it away. But no, but I was using my kind of, because when I was doing film school, I was so interested in just doing it and all the kind of theory and all the background. It was possibly how it was presented to me in terms of when it's like sound theory and that kind of stuff. It kind of gets me down in a way. So it's really interesting just once doing it. I think I'm a better learner when I could actually do it and see the results. And after all, it is about sounding good. But if you know how to get there, you're obviously going to get there so much faster, which is really, really interesting. And so now you don't do any music composition at all?
The only music stuff that I'm doing currently would just be me for myself. So yes, yeah. I mean, around that 2011 time, I had really come to. It's interesting you asked that question, because I had come to a place where I really found that I was much better on set than inside of the studio. And I don't know if some of that is maybe a little bit of burnout, a little bit of too many dark rooms for too many hours. But I really enjoy being around people and working with teams that really found my place there. And in a lot of the post work that we're doing currently in the studio is it's corporate. It's ad agencies, it's commercials, it's so that type of work isn't the same thing as necessarily as working on maybe a film production, in meaning that the type of post that we're doing is different than maybe what you would find in a larger scale facility, working on larger budget productions. So it's a little more isolating per se.
Yeah, no, it's no, because it's interesting. I do similar stuff in terms of just the corporate work, and it's not it. I mean, it's relatively easy, obviously, when you compare it to like a full blown feature film with all the different layers, all the different people, and that kind
Mhm.
of thing. Um, but yeah, I think for me as well, I started liking getting. Originally, I was when I was doing post production so much, I think I had a similar thing of burnout as well, and I and as well as getting sick of like fixing other people's problems. And so then that's where I shifted my focus completely onto kind of location stuff. And
Well,
then I realized that I'd literally just flipped the tables, and that though I'd my focus was now kind of completely on location stuff. It was kind of then they were passing it on to people that kind of weren't, in my eyes, kind of finishing the job to my standard, because I'd already come from a kind of post background, and so I was being like super hypercritical, especially since it was my own work. And so now I'm trying to bridge the both. But I definitely I feel exactly the same in terms of just that being a kind of very social creature in terms of being on set, and just kind of that kind of I guess it just when you've done a take, or when you're moving on from a scene, for you that's it. Whereas post production is definitely more of a long tail game than the short intensity of a location sound, especially with those 48-hour projects. I mean, they're insane if you do them
yeah,
all the way through.
I
But
mean,
it's cool.
it's interesting you even bring it up because there's so many facets to compare and think about, and I feel like when you've done post work and you've done production work, it's when I first started doing more production work, one of my fears was is it would dilute me as a mixer, or perhaps I would be too much going on, or one craft wouldn't. And a lot of that was just more head noise. I mean, I really felt as if uh, my craft and when I am in the studio has strengthened considerably. My mixing has strengthened considerably because, and also in production, when I started doing more production, especially working, on films and scripted content, and I've also learned that there are different types of listening in either environment as well. Like for instance, the sound when I first started doing a lot of ENG, the sound of a voiceover per se in a studio is much different type sound than recording dialogue per se. And just getting used to what sounds good in a pair of headphones versus listening on studio monitors are two totally different experiences. And it just takes experience to get that experience and start to understand how to translate. And I did have the pleasure of, so last year, one of the films I worked on was an independent film called Sandtown, and it was a low budget indie. It was about $250,000 total. And we were able to do, when I say we, I said myself and the other folks who worked on the film and sound. I had the pleasure to do the production sound mix, and as well as work on, and my company do the post-production mix as well. And that's the first time that I had been able to complete a film from both points of view, where I would say it wasn't like a short, or it was a legitimate movie and per se. And what an amazing learning experience, and incredible to hear. I got to, when they did the rough cuts on the edit, I got to go into the theater and listen to the raw production sound mix in a great theater, and was very nervous walking into that room, not knowing what I was about to experience, or maybe what had happened in editorial, maybe that they should or shouldn't have done, ended up being okay, but just definitely listening to my production mix for the full, 90 minutes taught me a lot. Having a guy named Paul Reekman, who is a dialogue editor. He's also an ADR recordist here in Atlanta and does a lot of ADR work. What he was able to do with the dialogue because once we've got the picture locked and the OMF, and he was able to populate all of the dialogue onto the timeline and the multi-tracks from the production files. What he was able to do blew my mind. When I got that dialogue back from him, I was just taken back, because some of the things that I was convinced we would be looping were fine.
Yeah.
And now he's a talented guy, and there are some great tools out there to help with that. I'm glad I didn't have to try to figure that out, because it just wouldn't have been my cup of tea. But moving into the to the Foley, and we had the pleasure of doing the 5.1 mix on it, sound design. I mean, we did all of the Foley. Matt Thierry, who is the guy I worked with, did all of the Foley for the film. And it sat for a year because the composer was having some health issues, unfortunately. And Tim Andrews is his name. He did the score. And he's in LA. He did the score. It came back to us, and then we started populating all of the assets to begin the mix of this film, and ended up installing a 5.1 system in the studio. We were going to go to another studio. We had reached out to a couple resources, but it turns out that there was a local vendor here that was going to rent us a controller and speakers, and we just ended up purchasing it. And it's so, and the reason why I bring that up is that, you know, that was an incredible experience, you know, and to really be able, and how I view that experience is to learn as a production mixer. And because if I look at the post work, you know, I didn't do maybe, you know, 20% of it myself. It was because I had talented people to help me with that project and finish it. And it's just that kind of collaboration that's just huge. To be able to be a part of that process was not only humbling, because you know, it just taught me that, you know, there is no do-it-alls, you know, and even on a lower budget film, you can still collaborate and learn and work as a team and do really great work that you're proud of.
It's just really surprising just how many ways different things can be interpreted as well. I mean, the more different people you work with, I mean, in the same vein as like just working with a set group of people that you trust is incredibly efficient in terms of just trading ideas and being on the similar page. Like you must collaborate with lots of new people and freelancers on various different projects as well, which gives like a whole different view on.
I've been pretty fortunate to have a consistent guys that I work with, and you know, and one of the things that I try to do is empower them to be like who or what they want to be, and I think that by doing that, I've been able to kind of form more long-term relationships in sound, and making sure that the people that I am collaborating with are passionate about working together. So, you know, it's a lot of the projects also that we work on are very specialized processes, meaning that it'd be very difficult just to bring in a freelancer to the studio to say, hey, we're doing this, you know, unless it's like simple VO work or whatever, or, you know, but a lot of the times, the processes are just, you know, from communicating to the producers or clients to how we're delivering, to what the standards and expectations are, to what the levels that we're giving. And there's so many levels in post, you know, but I, you know, I hope that's helpful, Adam.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting just picking up on the point of expectations and setting stuff. So with do you have a space to be able to kind of do your kind of spotting sessions and stuff? And talk us through your kind of process of getting stuff ready for post-production?
You know, it depends on the project, obviously. You know, since we are, you know, primarily like a sound mixer kind of audience, I guess we could talk a little bit about the process that we did for working on this film. So, you know, as far as the first steps in is getting a picture locked video, you know, which traditionally is delivered in reels per se, but you know, a lot of the times we'll work with the whole picture locked type process. You know, we'll get a QuickTime reference of the video file, and usually we'll ask for, believe it or not, like an H.264. And the reason why we ask for that is because we want the file size to be somewhat manageable for the person delivering to us to get to us. And then at that point, we will then convert it to Apple ProRes. Like 422 is a very, that or a DivX format for Pro Tools is very good as far as having a video on the timeline that can properly stream. You know, at that point, really making sure that there's an embedded stereo file in that QuickTime and that you are matching it to your time code locked OMF file. And at that point, Pro Tools has a feature in which it can actually physically read the original timestamp on the OMF mix file that allows it to populate the polyphonic production sound data. So
that's the field. What's it called? It's the field recorder something.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Yeah, I don't recall specifically what the name of it is. But providing your time code is intact, it can be done that way. And just to back up a little bit, if someone's working on a short or something like that, that may not be there anymore. Meaning that not all post-production processes are created equal. So there could be manual syncing that needs to be done, or sometimes filmmakers will leave the ISO tracks on the timeline as editing, so they can deliver everything in a AAF or OMF. I'm pretty sure the OMF has a 2 gig or 4 gig limit. Bless you, by the way. Good job on muting that. You know, so at that point, dialogue, you know, editing is the first step. And at that, for our process, and then at the same time, we can begin to make notes and so forth about what type of sound design we may need to record, or what things we need to capture, or what we can use for stock, and then start populating and spotting different sections and based upon what the needs are, you know, because in a lower budget type production such as that, you may not have the luxury of going and recording a bunch of sound design ahead of time. And figuring and then having everything done. You have to sometimes look at what am I looking at and what are the needs are here to help consolidate those assets and needs. And then, you know, so you can start working a lot with some of the sound design process or Foley while the dialogue editing is happening. And then it comes back like a Christmas present. When it's complete, and then you can really start piecing the things together. And we typically will work with dialogue, sound effects, backgrounds, you know, or we call them BGs, SFXs, music tracks, and then working with auxiliaries, obviously, for all those stems. Because ultimately, you're going to end up delivering what's called an M&E, music and effects, or you know, or where they can actually do all languages or so forth, 5/1 mixes, you know. So that would be for like the film stuff, you know, and that's, I described to you, and that may be, you know, that's from a small post studio in Atlanta and a small group of guys who are doing their best to figure it out to do the best job possible and getting good results doing it. And then corporate stuff is, you know, that type of stuff is much different, you know, like, you know, and a lot of times you're mixing, if it was recorded on set, you're mixing with whatever the editor decided to give you.
Yeah.
You know, and this is good to know, because a lot of the times those files, it's funny. I in the ENG in the world, I always feel like the editors just being familiar with workflows and how fast those things usually go. That if someone said one time that your sound is as good as its weakest source, and I believe that to be 90 times out of 91. I feel like what you send to camera is what they're going to use.
That'll.
Yeah, you would be surprised. You can't say, oh, make sure you use the ISOs or this or that, all those speeches are really on deaf ears, because I mean, once it's out of your hands and out of the production mixer's realm, and it goes to post, and what then happens in post is completely out of your control. So it wouldn't put it past them to. I can't tell you how many times I've watched television or something and heard boom and lav sum together, and we all know that telltale sign of the phasing, and so we're listening to both tracks at the same time, and making so often doing this kind of work in post has really, I felt like, affected in the positive way my choices that I make on set. A lot of these guys in the injuries, like, okay, boom left, lav right, camera, that's how we're doing the feed. I'm one to sometimes cheat. It just depends. If I don't like the lav, I might go boom left, boom right. Because and maybe I'm not a good guy for. But a lot of the times I really just feel like it's just an important point to bring up for guys who maybe are newer. Obviously, I think seasoned guys and stuff, they get this, and but so going from production, now I've been fortunate enough to have a lot of projects where I'll do the production and then I'll get to do the post as well in that world. So I have a lot of control per se on what happens in the sound world, and it's nice to be able to work and do that, because you learn constantly about what was working or what was not working, and hopefully that was on topic with what we were talking about.
Definitely. No, it's all.
I got too far left right to say, please. Yeah, that makes sense.
No. The thing is that it's all so much gold. It's really interesting picking up on that point, because I've had that trouble as well of just trying to use that field track recorder thing plugin in Pro Tools, or it's inbuilt, but it's a plugin that you get with it. Just in terms of what's needed, I need to understand better, to be honest, the picture editor process, in terms of how that maintaining of metadata and how that keeps getting destroyed in my case, which is really unfortunate.
Well, it happens. You're not alone.
No, definitely.
A lot of these productions, whether they, especially when we're talking about commercials or we say corporate ENG, a lot of these editing processes are being taken in-house, and meaning that some of the my guesstimation is that time code and understanding metadata and how to deliver that is becoming somewhat of a lost art. When I started working in sound and post-production, there was a period where I was doing freelancing for Turner Broadcasting and doing a lot of promo stuff with them. And everything that we delivered back and forth was from a time code locked digibeta. So there was no breaking the time code. There was no breaking the metadata, because the fact is that that's how you got the work. That you would show up, you'd go inside the building and you would pick up your digibeta tape, and then you would put it in there and you would machine lock it, and then you would have to print to the timeline because those things have 4 tracks, your work for the day. And then you would do that work, and then you would then lay it back, the mix track, for the pick, for editorial to then go do whatever they do to deliver. So, but now it's like you can record the sound and they can bring it into Adobe, or not to pick on Adobe, but it's not an Avid system, and do whatever they do. I mean, even Final Cut, thank goodness Final Cut went to the 10 or whatever happened, because it would support multiple frame rates on the same timeline. Like it would just, it could just break. It just made no sense. And you know, so a lot of these little things would create these like, what, you know, but you know, it is interesting, you know, but at the end of the day, you do the best you can with what you got and you work with it. But getting back to that point, I still think, I always think they're using what's going to camera. That doesn't mean I'm not going to record ISOs or give them what they need or somehow try to make that the goal. But I always keep that in mind.
Yeah, but again, I guess when you do post-production as well, you can know that even though they're going to use whatever, they're going to use the phasey mix track or
don't put it, you know, if anyone puts like a you know, a short shotgun or on a camera, you know, whether it be just for subtle ambience on B-roll, if you're doing documentary work, well, that's not a good analogy because that actually would be a good use in B-roll with but you know, it's, you know, there might be instances where you're in interview mode and then going to B-roll mode, and that I often think, you know, I'm unplugging that short shotgun on that, even though I'm only feeding a mono feed to this camera. I don't want it to be confused.
Yeah.
I don't even know if it's going to audio post, and I wouldn't put it past them to come back and say, what's wrong with our production sound? You know, why does it sound echoey? You know, well, you used the wrong track, you know, and it comes back to, well, why did you give them that track?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, well, you're not recording B-roll, so that shouldn't be plugged in. And you know, so everything that happens on film, I say film set or production, so it doesn't matter, matters. Everything, you know, and that's for me, I mean, it's taken time to get better and better at that, and have more foresight that, okay, you know, what makes sense here, and it be natural, you know. And go ahead.
No, it's interesting getting back to, because I've been chatting with people like Jeff Wexler and stuff, and that was when things had to be. It literally was, you were a sound mixer because there were no ISOs, there were no things,
right.
but you would have multiple sources, but you're limited so much by just having a 2-track Nagra, and it would be the case of the boom left, boom right. And it's interesting now how with all the ISOs, maybe sound recorders can get a little bit guilty of literally just being recordists and not necessarily taking into account all these kind of mixing aspects, because they think that it'll be, their work will be carried on for them later down the line. And it's even in, because I've done similar, like I saw that you did some like EPK stuff, and I've done similar EPK stuff where you can literally do the same interview for multiple channels with the same setup, and sometimes you'll literally have the interviewer panned left, and you'll have the people talking panned right, and some will be nicely mixed and some won't be mixed, and it's just fascinating to see just how many different variations of the same like 2-track file that you deliver being used, because they never use your ISOs, they never use anything else, because it's all about time.
Sure. I mean, unless something obviously goes wrong and there is no feed or something, then they're forced to, you know. But one thing I know for sure is that, you know, time is money, not only on set but also in post. It's all the way around, you know. And I don't think people are sweating it on that sort of level. And you know, and to touch on the EPK thing is even that is there's, you know, there's different, I'll talk about a level of gain staging, you know. There's a perception, oh, EPK is easy. No, it's not easy. And I see a lot of guys come in, maybe who've worked as utilities on first unit, come in and not be able to do EPK because that's a different job. And what that means is that, you know, knowing that you're getting a line level feed from the mixer, knowing that you're going to need a certain cable for that, you know, a line level cable, otherwise you're not going to be able to send maybe that hottest signal through a transmitter. Understanding how to then receive that signal at the proper level, set the transmitter at the proper level to the input of the mixer. And then that mixer is then in turn sending another wireless feed to your camera person. So I'm counting, well, there's obviously what the mixer's giving you, line level mix feed. So then you've got gain stage 1 into the transmitter, gain stage 2 into the input channel, okay? And then you've also got the gain stage 3, that is the level sending to your transmitter, that's the wireless hop, into gain stage 4, okay, which is your camera input. And it's funny. It's not as, because if you could put a -20 tone on a 411, if you got that as a hop on a camera and go, oh, this is where I need to be. But then as soon as you send a healthy signal out of, as for a wireless hop, and you put a -20 out that, then the signal changes then on what's on the camera and needs to be adjusted, because then it might be too low. And the reason why I bring that up as an example, there are several processes just in that thing that allow guys to like myself to continue to get that work. And because it's they want it to they want it to sound good, and I'm glad we bring that up, because that's important, I think, to respect all crafts in sound, whether it's EPK and not just a guy holding a pole, you know what I mean? That's and or just doing whatever. And if it's done correctly, there are many facets, not assets to it. There's assets to it too. And we're talking about something else too. That was not that, and I went off.
No, I think it's a really interesting point to pick up. It was more just about coming back to sound mixing, but we kind of covered that already. But even just that, just the point of having, I guess, respecting the craft, it is like such a naff way to put it, to be honest. But it really is that point of of the difference between the people that are just doing the job and love the job in the way. And you see I see so many people, even on the kind of low budget features I do, even on the whatever, that they're coming with the attitude of, even though knowing like it's a low budget feature, it's not going to be all the glitz and the glam. They come expecting more from the film than they do themselves in terms of delivering better stuff. And this is not necessarily just sound, but this is like every craft, and it's a dangerous thing overall if you get kind of infected with that, because there's the classic thing of the people that, like I got in film school, that the people that had given up, quote unquote, just did kind of corporate stuff. And I've totally found that not to be the case, because you can be just as creative and you can be more creative than a short film if you have a director that's passionate about it, and if you have a brief that's good, and that's all been explained to the agency, and there's so many different facets to it. Again,
I think it's important to and I know in my career, and if I had to look at it like today and what it is that I'm doing, is I'm really making an honest and humble attempt to follow my passion and be true to myself. And by doing so, I feel as if the next right steps on whether you should be working, in corporate or indie or bigger budget stuff, it will happen naturally as a result of that. And I think it's important that, no matter what film set you're on or what you're doing, that you have a good attitude, you maintain a level of integrity, and suit up, show up, the simple type things. And, I never feel like I'm too big for any production. Absolutely not. I obviously have career goals and things I'd like to accomplish, but I try to maintain a level of gratitude for wherever it is that I'm at in that moment, because I believe that if you can own what it is that you're doing, and wherever you are in your career or whatever turn it takes, that good things will continue to come. You know, it's when the attitude comes or the ego comes or and I think what's worth mentioning too is the fear of I'm not going to get where I want, or I'm not going to get what I want. Well, most of us in our life are not going to get what we want necessarily, but most of the times things will work out better than what it is that we thought we wanted. And I look at, you know, I feel like I have the benefit of my career being relatively young in the film industry. I still feel like I am. I know I am. And it's nice to have the background in sound to know that, to see what my career has been like. And it's a matter, it has its own timeline and it has its own process. And there's always a learning experience. There's always something that you can do to step up your game and do the right thing, you know, as far as in your craft. And when I start getting worried about, and it happens, I admit it, I'm like, oh, what's my next job? How am I gonna move my career to the next level and do this and do that? And, you know, I always come back to what can you be doing right now in your craft to improve what it is that you do, whether it is working, you know, this last year, there wasn't a lot of, you know, film or work per se, but I did get a good amount of second unit where I was really happy about, you know, and it was all union stuff. But, you know, I spent 7 months building 2 custom cards and, you know, using 3D CAD software and just going every detail, trying to give my 100%. And just by doing that, there's so much joy in that, like sharing your knowledge and working and as a result, you know, it's building momentum. And because I like what you say, you know, but if I ever find my attitude is getting like, you know, I mean, because there's been times I've been booked on something corporate and I've gotten offered, you know, mix work, and that was more in line with my current career goals. And, you know, I stuck with the gig I had and followed through. And, you know, and it was, you know, it's hard to do. But I try to say, you know, hey, I'm grateful I got work, you know, and that's another thing to think about, you know. So, but I don't want to go too far on that path. But I think that just kind of goes a little bit on maybe my work attitude and ethic that I try to maintain. That doesn't mean I always have it. I mean, I think everyone has a day where you go out there and you're like, I don't want to be here, you know, but those are the good times, because when you get through those days and those long, you know, I know we've both been in those long, you know, just it's part of the business, you know, and I think that's all I have to say for that. Yeah.
No, it's completely true. There's so many facets to it. I just want to say thank you very much, because it has been. I wanted to keep to my time period.
Thank you for bringing. I can't believe it went by this fast. I was like,
I told you it would. Yeah.
I'll give you an hour.
But we will. I plan to have another sound chat with you again soon, because again I want to keep up with this continuity, and there are so many different issues to cover with so many different people. Okay. But it's a great beginning to a conversation that we'll keep going with many people. So so thank you very much for joining me for the sound chat. I'll kind of wrap up the video section of this, and then we can talk a bit about after. But for anyone that's watching the replay as well, you can leave kind of comments and questions below, and I'll kind of forward them on to Michael as well. Because another great part of this is actually that some of the sound chats that I've done, people have actually got in touch and been able to collaborate further, obviously with people that are based all over the world doing all sorts of different things. Right. So hopefully I can forward that on as well, which would be awesome. But I will leave you to say the final goodbye, and goodbye to everyone from me. So over to you to say goodbye to everyone, Michael.
Yeah, thanks so much, guys, for listening. Have a nice day.